Hey, what's up everybody? This is Suburbs501 and today I want to go over the best build for the MCX in patch 12.9 of Escape From Tarkov. Now, before we get into the video, 99% of you that watch my videos aren't subscribed, so make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with all my Escape From Tarkov videos. And like with all of my builds, there will be a link in the description to the Tarkov Gunsmith website where you can go and see all the parts you need for this build and see updated prices for all those parts on the flea market. Now, I wanted to go back over the MCX because there has been some pretty substantial changes in some recent updates to the game that have pretty heavily affected this weapon. And the main change that has affected this weapon is the camera recoil reduction. And if you don't know what that is, essentially, past just the weapon's recoil that makes the weapon bounce around and be harder to hit targets, there's also a camera recoil in the game. And most people have probably noticed this and not known what it is. And it's essentially your camera or your perspective kind of has its own recoil, which doesn't effectively change the weapon's recoil, but it makes it much harder for you to be able to stay on target while aiming the weapon. And the change that occurred that everything besides DMRs and shotguns got a 30 to a 50% reduction in this camera recoil, making most weapons in the game much easier to use because you can stay on target even with higher recoil much more easily. And specifically with the MCX, this has helped this weapon a ton because it is a slightly higher recoil than most of the other fully automatic meta weapons, but also there have been tons of talk and tons of posts on Reddit saying that the MCX actually had even higher camera recoil than most of the other fully automatic weapons. So this change, even more so, has helped the MCX. Now, before we get into all the parts of the build, I want to go over something that's still broken with some of the parts for the MCX, and more specifically, the muzzle brake. And I will have some footage of showing this weapon with this muzzle brake and without the muzzle brake. And essentially what's broken is that if you put a muzzle brake on this weapon, which with this 3-part muzzle brake silencer combination, you can actually take it off and the weapon still works fine. But if you have any of the muzzle brakes on, which actually reduce the recoil by 18, it will still have muzzle flash like you don't have a silencer. And silencers should massively reduce the muzzle flash of pretty much any weapon that has a silencer on it. But this is broken because it's still having the muzzle flash like the silencer isn't on. So you see in the footage when I have the muzzle brake on and off, there's a massive difference in muzzle flash and how much smoke is being generated in front of the weapon. So it is much harder to stay on target because there's just a ton of muzzle flash and effects in front of your weapon when using this. If you go from using the best muzzle brake, which is the SIG 2-port muzzle brake, and you take it off, it's going to add 18 additional recoil to the weapon, putting it up to 76 vertical recoil. If you want to use it like that, say you're someone that is going to tap a lot more, you could actually use it like that. You're just not going to be able to spray this weapon near as much. But personally, even with that, I would say keeping the muzzle brake on is, in my opinion, better just because you can spray it more, even though it's going to be a bit harder to stay on target because of all the effects. But with that being said, the first part of the build is the sight. And the other things you have to determine with the sight are what sight you like to use, what range you're going to be using the weapon at, and how much the sight is going to affect the ergo of the weapon. And personally, I use the EOTech XP S30, and I don't think any longer range sights are going to work that well with this weapon. You could probably get away with something like a Valide. Personally, I would just stick with red dots or holographic sights. And next, we're using front and rear sights. You can use whichever front and rear sights give +1 ergo apiece. I use the Magpul MBus Gen 2 front and rear sights for additional ergo. You're just going to be using the base charging handle. There are no other options for that. And then you're going to be using the SIG Sire thin lightweight MCX/MPX stock. And then we're going to be using the 229mm barrel. And essentially a lot of the parts for this build are pretty close to what the lowest recoil for this weapon would be because you can't change a ton of the parts. And the biggest issue with this weapon is still its recoil. And then for the magazine, you have pretty much any option that the other 5.56 NATO weapons have, because the 300 Blackout will fit in any of those magazines. Personally, I would always be recommending the Magpul PMag round 60 mag. The silver one reduces the ergo by an additional 2, and most of the time they're pretty similar prices, so I'd always recommend using this mag. If you're going to be doing something different and using a 30 rounder, you're going to be having a massive increase to the ergo. Pretty much any of these 30 rounders are going to give 13 ergo compared to the 60 rounder, but with 800 RPM, I would personally always just use the 60 rounder. Then for the pistol grip, you essentially have two options. You have the Nora Arms Growl S pistol grip, and then you also have the HK Ergo PSG-1. Now, technically, the Growl pistol grip is better because it weighs slightly less than the HK Ergo one. That weight increase or reduction is so minimal that it's pretty much not going to affect your weapon at all. Get which either one of these is cheaper. Then for the upper receiver, you don't have any other options, so you're just going to be using the base one. Then we're going to be using the SIG 12-inch key mod foregrip. And then for our grip, we're going to be using the Victor CAS-V key mod 6-inch guide. Now there are two 6-inch guides. There's also the Strike Industries. They do the same exact thing, so get whichever one is cheaper. And on that, we're going to be using the Hera Arms CQR tactical grip. Now the reason I'm using this one is because I think it has the best mix of recoil reduction and ergo. If you want to go with the RK2, that's going to give you a decent recoil reduction, but it's also going to lose you an additional 7 ergo, which I think is going to take the ergo to a point that's too low. The weapon is going to start to feel not that great to use with that low of ergo. But if, say, you wanted to use something like the RK2, you could also, if you wanted to, use, say, a 30 rounder, which would take you to right here, a slightly lower recoil, but also keep you at good ergo. And personally, I would just rather use the Hera Arms and stick with 60 rounders and have a more of a balanced build while keeping that 60 rounder. Next, we have our tactical device, which is going to go on a Victor CAS-V key mod 2-inch guide. And I would recommend using the D-Ball tactical flashlight. It gives you an IR flashlight and a normal flashlight, but you can use whatever tactical device you want to use. And then for the muzzle brake, we're going to be using the SIG taper lock muzzle adapter. Then on that, we're going to have the SIG 2-port muzzle brake. And then on that, we're going to be using the SIG Sire SRD QD sound suppressor. And like we already went over, you can choose if you want to use the muzzle brake and have that much higher muzzle flash, or take it off and have a much higher recoil but not have that muzzle flash issue. And then the last part is the gas block, which you don't have any options for, so you're just going to be using the one that comes on. And that is the entirety of the build. It's very similar to the lowest recoil version of this build. There's pretty much only like one change between the two because there's not a ton you can do with this weapon. But I want to go back over it because, in my opinion, it is overall stronger with the camera recoil reduction changes. So it makes it a little bit more viable of a weapon. And like I said, there will be a link in the description to the Tarkov Gunsmith website where you can easily see all the parts you need for this build and see updated prices for all those parts on the flea market. So subscribe if you want to see more Escape from Tarkov videos, leave a like if you liked the video, leave a comment down below what you guys think about this build, and thanks for watching.
Пацаны! Вали кепку! Наших валят! Вижу! Понял. Кройся! Чужая!